so that you guys can get to know me a little bit better, like I said before, my name is BJ. I am a senior, and I studied abroad in Athens. I am a classics major. I study in particular the development, and my friends have heard this spiel a million times, but I study the development of ancient democracy and how it informs the development of modern developing democracies. And somehow through that study, I also became interested specifically in modern development in Francophone Africa and in journalists as leaders in developing democracy. So these are kind of all of the interests that eventually led me to my year abroad. And the way that my year abroad was broken down was I started in our campus in Talwa, which I would also advise going to. We have, generally there's always a classics class offered, and it's a great place to study classics. And then I ended up in Athens for a semester, and then Morocco. So I'm going to focus on Athens, but I'll tell you a little bit about how it was abroad in all of those places. So I knew before I came to Tufts, that I wanted to go abroad, and I wanted to go abroad for a whole year. I knew what my interests were, both that ancient and that modern interest, and I knew that I wanted that to be reflected in my abroad year as well. So I knew I wanted to start off in an ancient place and end up in a modern developing place. So I was kind of mainly stuck between Athens and Italy, and not just Athens, but Greece as a whole. And I eventually chose Greece and Athens because I, believe it or not, with my democracy interest, was more of a Romanist, and at Tufts had studied more about Rome than about Greece. And as a classics major, I wanted a little bit more balance, and I really wanted to kind of have an intensive semester that just focused on Greece and ancient Greek history. So in considering what program to choose, I did a little research. I found out that there are really not that many programs in Greece. There are even fewer in Athens itself, and I was pretty sure I wanted to be in Athens. And the college year in Athens program, I had been to a couple of lectures of this same kind, actually, with alums, and CYA seemed really interesting, seemed like a really great program. I researched it, and it just seemed like the program to do, and as well I knew that it was trusted by Tufts and by Tufts alums. Transfer of credit, by the way, which I'll talk about later, is really simple because Tufts has had so many students go on the college year in Athens program. So, let's see. Oh, we're not even in the slideshow mode. Here. Figure out how to use this new PowerPoint. Oh, thank you. Okay, there we go. So, why Athens? It has something to offer everyone. I was what I would think of as like a typical candidate to go abroad and study in Athens, but it really does cater to a lot of different interests, especially college year in Athens. And so if you're interested in anthropology, classics, archaeology, economics even, especially right now is perfect in Greece, modern European history, really pretty much anything other than sciences, college year in Athens has it. And Greece itself, though, I shouldn't exclude sciences because Greece itself is a great place to study really anything. It is, I probably don't have to tell you, a major European city, so it's not only an ancient place, but it's also a very modern place. And I was surprised because I really thought that I would just be going to live in this ancient place with scenes like that every day. But I was actually surprised that there was a very vibrant modern life going on around me, and that was really part of what shaped my experience there and what has developed my interests further now that I, as a senior at Tufts, it really impacted what I studied this year and what I will continue on to do. Just some examples of that was I was walking around once with a friend in one of the neighborhoods in Monastiraki where I was doing just some basic shopping. And I had read about a clothing store that was pretty well known. And I went in, and it looked really cool on the outside. There were all of these like design your own sweatshirts and things like that. And I went in on the inside, and it was almost too cool for me. They just had all of these very hip, avant-garde fashions and all of these things, and you might not really think of Greece as that kind of modern place, but it definitely has that. So it's not just for the ancient, basically. There are also these things, of course, captivating, friendly people, easy access to the rest of Europe when you want to travel. Some CYA basics. The basic way that CYA operates, every study abroad program is different, and that's what I've kind of learned in doing these study abroad programs. And every program, at least the programs that I went on, are set up really well, but you can take extra steps to make it even better. So the way CYA is set up, though, is you're living in an apartment with other Americans, differing in number. I lived with 5 other American girls, and it is by gender. You're either given an apartment in Pangradi, these are 2 neighborhoods, Pangradi or Kolonaki. This is actually out of my bedroom window in Pangradi. And living in Pangradi is great because you basically school was like right there. So, you know, if you had an early class or something like that and you're not a big walker or something, you can kind of just roll right into class. But Kolonaki is also really great. It's one of Athens' posher neighborhoods, and whereas Pangradi has like a lot of great small kind of atmospheric neighborhood things, Kolonaki has, I would say, more culture to it. But and also one thing is that you really can't specify where you want to live. They assign it to you, but you really learn to love your neighborhood, and they're basically neighboring neighborhoods. So if you want to go explore the other, you totally can. And there are many schools represented. Tufts is not the only school that you're going to find there. I had friends, just for example, that were living in my apartment. There was a girl from UMass Amherst. There was a girl from Mount Holyoke. Holy Cross seems to be a very big Massachusetts apartment. Kalamazoo, though. And every apartment that CYA has is very close to everything you would need. Close to grocery stores, laundry is in the academic center. There's one main building, and it is basically like a Tufts campus, but in one large building. So all of your classes will be there. Whenever you need to go visit a professor for office hours, that's generally where you'll find them. Cafeteria, that's there. And speaking of the cafeteria, they offer you typically lunch during the weekdays, and it's a delicious, delicious lunch. It's made by a staff that you get to know really well, and they cook you traditional Greek fare, and they even teach you how to cook in their cooking classes. But at the same time, they want you to get out into your neighborhood and get out into Athens and explore kind of the food culture for yourself. So during the weekend, and also for breakfast and dinner, it's good to get out there. Buy your own food in the grocery store is also a good experience, and cooking with your friends in your apartment. That way you kind of get to know how Greek grocery stores work. So there are lots of options in terms of food. There actually, in my neighborhood, just kind of like up in there, is a lovely pizzeria, and the owner is actually Italian, and he loves college year in Athens people. So he got to know them really well and makes delicious pizzas and delicious sandwiches, and would always talk to us and kind of help us improve our Greek, saying Efharisto, which means thank you, and just, you know, counting, and very basic things. Both neighborhoods are great, though. Let's see. So the typical load, whereas the typical course load here is 4 to 5 classes, there pretty much everyone takes 4 classes, that's a pretty good thing. It gives you more time to spend actually out and about in Athens learning about the city itself. There are activities just like you would find here. For example, I'm on the equestrian team, and I didn't choose to ride there, but if I wanted to, I could have done horseback riding there. It's also hiking. I decided to take a conservation seminar, which was really interesting. A conservationist from the Agora came and taught us in 3 different classes. And what he did was it was very secretive at first. He told us to buy rice and an imitation pot in Plaka. And Plaka is another neighborhood. It's the more touristy neighborhood. It's where you'll find the Acropolis in the picture I had before. And so, of course, you're walking around and they sell all these pots that look ancient, and they've got all of these gods and goddesses on them, but obviously they're reproduction pots. So we had to buy one of those. Then we came to the first class, and we just smashed it on the ground. It was actually really fun. And then the rice we used to stabilize it as we pieced it back together. And then in the 3 different sessions, it was basically as if we had dug out an ancient pot in shards and put it back together. We learned how to fill in any missing pieces. It was really exciting and really fun. So you can do that. I also blogged a little bit because I was becoming interested in journalism at that point, so I helped with the CYA blog. But there are lots of things. I also ran around the National Gardens and got to run with actual Greek people and would run through Syntagma, which I'm sure you've all seen in the news. It's that famous square where everyone's protesting. So that was really fun too, running around the National Gardens. Classes and professors. It's fairly similar to Tufts. Like I said earlier, there's an easy transfer of credit, just pre-request on Web Center, and all of my classes transferred. Anyone that I know, all of their classes have transferred. They are run in a very similar way to Tufts classes. It probably shouldn't be too much that you're not familiar with. But at the same time, there's this actually a very, very different element, which is that there's something built in called study travel, which I have a slide on later and we'll talk about. But there's also this idea of you have the city in front of you, and the city is your classroom. And your professors are not just professors, but they're experts. One of my professors was an archaeologist at the Agora and had also worked in other archaeological projects on the Acropolis. And so because of that, it was like we were VIPs. We would just be able to go behind the scenes anywhere. We got to go in the Parthenon and walk around in it, and nobody gets to do that. And we got to see behind the scenes at the Agora and what that's like. And just thinking about it and talking about it is not as exciting as it actually was, but that first time when they kind of just let us through those doors that nobody else can go through was incredible, especially if you're studying this ancient material and you've been studying it for years now, and all of a sudden it's there right in front of you and you're walking in those same ancient spaces. And even if you are not a classics major and you're not interested in the ancient world that much, it's still a really exciting feeling. And these are, I'm passing that course guide around, but really they're classes in any field you'd want to take, which is great. It's not just ancient stuff. There's also a lot of history, language, modern Greek, for example. I encourage you to take modern Greek. I was so interested in taking so many of the other classes that I didn't get to fit modern Greek in, and they really, really strongly encourage it, so I was a little nervous about that. But if you are like me, don't be nervous about it, because you still learn plenty of modern Greek just in walking around, talking to friends, talking to shopkeepers, so don't panic. But it is good to take a modern Greek class, of course. And travel, like I was talking about, study travel. It's this great idea that College Year in Athens has as I've looked at other programs, and this is a fairly unique thing that they have. They have built-in trips that they take you on, so you're not just going to be in Athens the whole time. You're really going to get out and see the whole country. You're going to go to the Peloponnese. You're going to go to Crete. Those were my 2 trips. They try to do 2 trips a year to 2 major places in Greece other than Attica, which is where Athens is. And they are kind of a more touristy approach because you're only there for a week or so, but it's up to you then to really take that time while you're on that trip to go beyond and to really see what life is like in those places. But CYA does a good job. The professors come along with you. They are your tour guides as well as your teachers for that trip, and they also help. They've been to these places hundreds of times, so they also try to take you to their favorite spots, introduce you to friends that they have in those places, so it's really great. Speaking of the professors, by the way, I didn't mention that a lot of the professors are American and are living abroad. Some of the professors are Greek, some of the professors come from Turkey or Italy. It's international, which is interesting. That also kind of shapes your experience there. So other than that, there are also optional trips. One of the optional trips my year was to Andros, one of the islands, and another was to northern Greece. So it's a similar trip to the ones that are built in and that you go on, but they're optional and they are a little bit of an extra fee, but they're definitely worth going on because, once again, that's a whole other part of the country that you get to see. And the islands are I would almost even recommend going again on your own, even separate of the CYA trip, because it's incredible to compare people and life in Athens versus people and life in Crete. It's almost like a whole other country. You can read, by the way, I have a resources page at the end, but I don't think I put the blog on, but there's a David Fellows blog where all of us have kind of just blogged about our experiences there, and that can be really helpful. So then one other kind of trip is you can do a trip of your own. There are regular school breaks like we have. There's a spring break, a fall break, and you can choose where you want to go. I know plenty of people that went to France, went to very typical places, but I was with Colleen, who unfortunately has a class, so we can't hear from her, but I went with Colleen and another one of our friends to Istanbul, and it was really, really exciting because for some reason, before going to Athens, I really hadn't connected Istanbul with its ancient history as much as I should have, so it was great to just go and to see that. And it was only 3 days or so, but we saw so much, and this picture actually is from Istanbul. It was a great experience. Safety. Obviously, the news portrays Greece in an interesting way right now, especially work. The reason I'm dressed like this, by the way, is because I just came from work in Boston at WHDH, and that's local news. But being interested in journalism, I've seen the way that the news media portrays Athens, and I kind of turn to them a lot of the time, people that I'm working with, and laugh about it because that's really not the way that it is. That's just like a very hyper-focused perspective on Athens at the moment. Obviously, there is a lot of turmoil there. That feeling is present, but I never felt in harm's way. I always felt safe. You just need to keep your wits about you as you would anywhere, but not because of the protesting that's going on, more so for small things like robberies. I had a friend who wasn't paying attention on the bus and had her wallet stolen, but I'm from New York. That would happen in New York all the time. So you just really need to keep your wits about you, pay attention as you would anywhere. But don't worry about it. I would actually suggest, CYA is very careful about protecting you. They won't let you go near protests or anything, but I would suggest talking to people who are protesting or, getting to know people that are in that situation so you can learn from them. Because actually that's something that really helped me when I moved on to a more exotic place like Morocco, where I did a journalism program, was I was familiar with this kind of mentality and why people go about revolting and kind of ideas like that, and that helped me feel more comfortable in my next experience. So that's something great that you can learn from. These are just some pictures. These don't have to relate to safety necessarily. I thought the scrolls were kind of creative for safety. But the salad, that's just a typical horiatiki, which is a Greek salad, which I love and miss dearly. That's Colleen, by the way, if you don't know her. And those are two of our other friends in Crete, actually. So after Greece, everybody has a different experience after their study abroad program. I knew that I wanted to go abroad again, so while I was in Athens, I was really in love with my experience in Athens and considered living there for a little bit of a longer period of time, which is an option that a lot of people take because there's definitely something to be said about staying in a place for a very extended period of time. 4 months is a very long period of time, but a year is something entirely different. And I know several people who stayed for the whole year. However, the majority of people do only stay for a semester. So if you do want to stay at college here in Athens for a year, you should just be prepared to meet new roommates, meet some new friends. There is going to be that change up, but it's definitely very worth it. I knew, though, that I wanted to move to a modern place, developing place, possibly in Francophone Africa, and possibly having something to do with journalism. So I moved on to Morocco, where, like I said, these protests, helped me prepare for that next semester abroad. I also added in toilet paper because I wouldn't have known before going to Athens if it wasn't a lecture like this that I had sat in on, but actually Athens has a very interesting plumbing system where you cannot flush toilet paper. You have to throw it away in a garbage can next to the toilet, and then you throw it away afterward. And what journalists really don't tell you about the protests that are going on in Athens, or have been going on for the past few years, is that these kinds of protests have been going on throughout Athenian and Greek history. This is how the Greeks interact with their government. They're very vocal, and they're also very willing to strike to show what they're unhappy about. So sometimes that means a garbage strike, and this doesn't happen that often, but it happened once while I was in Athens, and they just don't pick up the garbage for as many ever weeks or days as it takes to get whatever they're looking to get. So I think for us it was almost a month without garbage being picked up, and that can get a little gross because there's literally garbage overflowing in the streets. But you look at it, when you're living there, you look at it in a totally different perspective. Being abroad in general and being abroad in Greece really teaches you a whole different attitude that we don't have here. It teaches you to kind of just be a little bit more relaxed, to take things as they come, see what an experience is going to pan out to be, not to have everything scheduled at every minute. And so you really just kind of there's a phrase actually in Arabic, a Moroccan Arabic phrase, mashki mushki, which means no problem, that because it's kind of similar in Morocco, funny enough, that people use, and that's kind of just the attitude. You're walking among this garbage, and it's just this is a part of experiencing life there, and you want to be wide-eyed and just take it all in and see what it would be like to be living there. So it's never anything really that dangerous or that gross. Never, not in my experience. So applying and funding, it's very easy to apply. We were talking about earlier that it's a rolling process. For some reason, I thought when I was applying that I needed to apply like as a sophomore the year before, but you don't need to do that. You can apply pretty much at any time. Of course, earlier is better in some ways because it helps you form your own plans. But luckily, the college year in Athens office is very familiar with tough students. They like tough students. We're well prepared to go study abroad in Athens, so I wouldn't be too worried if you're, if you're not like the first person to apply for that semester. It'll be okay. You need 2 recommendations, a personal statement of credit transfer, which is really easy. You just go talk to the study abroad office and they'll sign it for you. And then just your initial academic plan, what classes you're thinking about taking. And the David Fellowship with an exclamation point. The David Fellowship was an amazing opportunity in several ways. First of all, it fully financed for me and for Colleen pretty much everything. Our housing, our academic experience, for the study travel that CYA has built in, it had that built in. So that was really fantastic. It also gives you a great stipend, which we used for food and anything that you might need. And so, of course, that was a great thing about it. But another great thing about it was that if I had not had the David Fellowship, I probably wouldn't have had a blog, because that's one of the requirements, is that you keep a blog. And the blog was actually one of the best things to happen to me because it really helped me reflect on my process. And I'm not, unfortunately, giving you like a lot of my personal experiences that happened in Athens. I wanted to kind of tell you guys the nitty-gritty about how you apply, what are the benefits, things like that. But you should definitely go read the blogs because there are a lot of just like recaps of what we experienced, just like sections where we broke down what we were thinking and academically what we were thinking, and that's really interesting. And speaking of actually academically what we were thinking, before tips, I'll tell you a little bit more about what classes I took. I took a few classes there. I took Latin, intermediate Latin, Roman comedy, which was really funny. We read the Mostellaria, and it takes place in Athens. So they really try to get everything to fit around this idea of Athens or the Mediterranean or Europe. And so that was a really great class. I also took a class on the origins of democracy in Athens, which was great because I would never have been able to take that class at Tufts. We haven't really offered that class at Tufts before, and that is what I'm studying. So that's one of the great things about studying abroad in general and about studying abroad in college year in Athens, especially as a student that is in this kind of history or ancient studies discipline is they offer a lot of classes that you would not be able to take at Tufts. So it really supplements your education really well. Also, because I wanted to study abroad the whole year, I needed something to count for my history of Greece requirement for my classics major. And they offer the same class, basically. So that was fantastic. That worked out really well. And what else did I take? Oh, I also took Archaeology of Athens, which I would definitely recommend to anyone. Take a class that is clearly going to get you out in the city, because that's one of the ways you really learn how to get around Athens. We took public transportation all the time. There's a picture of the Monastiraki metro here. I learned how to take that. I learned how to take the buses. That was one of the ways that I really got to mingle with Athenians, was just walking places. I did a lot of walking, which I love, and I think most people like. Because you also, while you're walking around the city, you really just don't know what you're going to encounter, but you always run into something, and it's really interesting. This is on one of our trips at Delphi. And so, okay, the tips. I have some tips because, and actually, interestingly, College Year in Athens does the same thing. When you get there, they give you an orientation. It's not like they just throw you into it. They will orient you. And one of the things they do in the orientation is gather the advice from the previous semester's students to help you. So some of my tips are really befriend Greeks. Because you're living in an apartment with other Americans, you tend to get stuck in this College Year in Athens bubble, which is great because you're in this, great academic community where there are people thinking all of these interesting thoughts about what's going on with modern Greece and connecting that with ancient Greece, and it's really exciting. But at the same time, one of the best experiences you'll have is to actually make friends in Athens and come away with Greek friends, because I talk to some of my Greek friends online. I, ask them what's going on with them there, like how are things changing. If I ever go back, I can visit them. They can come visit me. That's a really valuable experience, and they will also show you around the city in a way that you would never be able to see the city if you didn't know somebody that's actually been living there for a long time. So definitely befriend Greeks. How do you do that? Well, Nadia Melinotis, the student activities director, she will give you a sheet full of information about what activities you can participate in while you're in CYA. And definitely try to pick out some of those activities that will get you interacting with Greeks. Also, just go to events, go to museum, just go to museums, go to art openings, go to anything that will get you interacting with Greek people, and make friends with them that way. Try to make at least one or two really good Greek friends. Along that vein of thinking, become an honorary citizen. Don't approach it as you're just a tourist there for 4 months. Really become Athenian for those 4 months. Go to the grocery store, interact with your local shopkeepers, because it's really great. That really helps you. One of my last experiences that I had in Athens was I went to the Megaron to see Swan Lake. And actually, a lot of my friends had left at that point, so I was all alone. And I was just sitting there surrounded by Greek families and Greek people, and I felt Athenian. I felt like I really had a life there. I had my school that I was studying, and then I would go home to my apartment, and then I would go out and do something cultural, and that's a really great feeling. That's an experience that you won't really get to have throughout your life, and this is a unique opportunity to have it. Find a few favorite spots. My favorite spot in Athens is the Pnyx, and that's surprisingly fitting because the Pnyx was where the Athenian Assembly met, so it is kind of known as this place of Athenian democracy. But it's just a very peaceful, quiet place right now. It's not as touristy as, say, the Acropolis, where everyone's walking back and forth all the time. It's just your, quiet area, and it's a big place actually for Athenians. They walk their dogs there, they run there. So, get to know a couple of your favorite places, your favorite cafes. That's what will make you feel like an honorary citizen, and that's what will help you befriend Greeks. Seek your professors out. Just like professors here, most of them are really great people, really nice and open to helping you with anything you need, and it goes beyond that too. The professors at College Year in Athens, and I've experienced this with Tufts professors too a little bit, they'll invite you over to their house for dinner. They will tell you to come with their family to go to their favorite taverna. They will, supplement your experience in that way, and that's just such a great way to know these people who are not only incredible thinkers, and you can talk to them about all different kinds of, ancient studies, modern studies, but they're also people who are living these fascinating lives abroad, and that can be really interesting. I don't know the exact data or like the exact studies, but I've heard of several studies that kind of interview people who have been abroad as students and ask them if they've ever considered going abroad again to live abroad. And it's funny, a lot of people who study abroad eventually choose to live abroad at some point or have some other extended abroad experience. So definitely talk to them. They live these fascinating lives. And also, even the most, I was surprised that my ancient democracy professor, who was Canadian, but, was actually an expert in studying Sparta and then was teaching this class on Athens and democracy, I was surprised, but every class he would start out by talking about that day's metro strike and, his friends that were striking or couldn't afford to go to the doctor, these very interesting ideas. So everybody has an opinion on the modern crisis, and that really shapes your experience there and is fascinating. Also, buy sandals. Greek sandals are really, really well known, and there are actually a couple of particularly well-known sandal places, and it just, adds to it, makes you feel Athenian. And these are the resources. I put the College Year in Athens website. That's David over there. That's his email. That's my email. Also, there's a CYA office right in Cambridge. So I've been over there before. If I had a couple questions for them, you can just kind of hop on the T and talk to them. And then just look at blogs. Whenever I'm going somewhere, I love to just search life in Athens and try to find an expat blog and just, what do they do? What stores do they go to? What cafes? And I should have put our blog, but I will probably send it to the Tupac list. And that's also a great blog to follow. And what else was I going to say? There was one other thing. Think about my experience there, but I don't quite remember. But it was really, all I can say is that it was an incredible experience. The David Fellowship was very, very helpful, and the College Year in Athens itself was a great program. It was everything I was looking for in the sense that it was kind of this crash course in Greek, not Greek the language, but ancient Greek studies, which is what I needed. It was also this great living abroad experience, especially living abroad among all of this ancient stuff that I had been studying. And it also prepared me for that next semester abroad as well, and that was really important. So I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them, and also feel free to email me any questions too later. Nothing? I guess that was very thorough.
Yeah.